The title of this morning's lesson is about misunderstanding. All right, about misunderstanding. All right, so we know that misunderstandings happens. Right, misunderstandings happen, and in this particular season, we know we're coming up to family reunions. Right, and we know that families can have misunderstandings. All right, misunderstandings will lead to somebody's potato salad not getting touched. Right, misunderstandings will create tension within a family. Misunderstandings will end friendships. Misunderstandings will continue to strain relationships. Husband and wife, son and father, mother and daughter, all from misunderstandings. Misunderstandings have started wars. Misunderstandings have ended businesses. They have crumbled empires. Misunderstandings have even stopped people from coming to church. Amen. Misunderstandings will and will continue to prevent people from doing God's work. Amen. All because of a misunderstanding. All because there was something that just didn't click right. And because of that, people's main purpose on earth to serve God has been perverted. When we look at the definition of misunderstanding, we'll take a look at it in two different ways. A misunderstanding is identified as a failure to understand something correctly. Well, I'm not necessarily a fan of using the same word to kind of define it, right? You know, to understand is part of the root of misunderstanding. So let's take a look at what understand means, right? So and that's having a clear or complete idea of a subject or a message. Right? So we can understand that when there's a misunderstanding, that there's a failure to do a couple things. Right? When these happen, that you either have a failure to communicate or a failure to comprehend. Right? When these two things meet, then you have a misunderstanding. Commonly, we can understand that when there's a failure to communicate, right, it involves at least two people. But for us to be able to when we talk about the failure to comprehend, that's mainly the person on one person. That error is on one person, right? Now we want to understand, for there to be communication, right? You got to have a couple things, right? You got to have a sender, right? This is the person that's communicating the message, right? Then you got to have a receiver. That's going to be the recipient. Right? I'm taking in a message if someone is communicating to it. Also, there has to be a message to communicate. Right? If you have a communicator, you have a receiver, and you have no message, guess what you have? A whole bunch of nothing. Okay? And then you got to have agreed upon format in which that method is going to be communicated. Right? And that's going to be the medium by which we communicate. Right? So you got to have those things if you want to be able to communicate effectively. All right? In our spiritual realm, we got to understand who is the communicator. All right? We got to understand who is the communicator. We got to realize that. All right? Now, the creator is the communicator. All right? Now, that's God. Right? So, God is the communicator. He created us, and it was his responsibility to make sure that we were communicated what he wanted us to communicate, what he wanted us to be communicated with. All right? We can go back and we look at the Bible and we see that God does communicate. Right? God communicated with Jesus. God communicated. He talked with the prophets. God talked to Elijah. God talked to David. God talked to Jacob. He talked to Isaac. He talked to Abraham. He talked to Moses. Right? He talked to Adam. Right? And God talks to us today through his holy and divine word. Amen. Right? So God's not going to come up short on his end of communicating his message. God is that expert communicator. Amen. All right? And one of the things that God does is God communicates at a level that everybody can receive that message. Amen. Right? So that's what God does. That's what God does. And God uses different types of means to communicate. All right? God uses visual communication. Yeah, he did. Everybody remember how he communicated with the children of Israel when they were in the wilderness? Right? How did he you communicate with them? Did they have Google Maps? No, they didn't have Google Maps, right? No, what did they have? By day, God led them by a cloud, right? And by night, he was a pillar of fire. They used visual means by which to communicate to his people where he wanted them to go. All right? Not only is God a visual communicator, God also is an excellent written communicator. Yeah, he did. Right on Mount Sinai when Moses went up. Right? Didn't God write down some things on those two tablets? Right? My Bible says that it was with his finger that he wrote those tablets. Right? God is an excellent written communicator. And now there's another one that we want to talk about. He's an oral communicator. All right? Right? So the root word of that is we want to get down that God talks. Right? God uses his voice. God uses sound. Right? We go to 1 Corinthians chapter 15. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 52. God's going to tell you that when the end of time comes, guess what? We're going to hear something. All right, and when we hear that trumpet sound, guess what? That's God talking. All right, so God uses various ways to communicate with us. All right, so now, so we understand that God is the that with God being the communicator, who is the receiver? All right. So if the creator is the communicator, the created is the receiver. Okay? The created is the receiver. And we got a responsibility as the receiver. Right? So God understands some things about the receiver, right? Because he created it. Right? So God knows the capability of his creations. Right? God knows our limitations. Right? Moses wanted to tell God that he was so limited that he wasn't worthy of doing the job that he was called out. Right? But then God had to remind him, Moses, who created you? Right. Who created your mouth? Right? Let me do what I do and you just do what I tell you to do. Right? So God knows our strengths. God knows our weaknesses. Amen. God understands that. And when God is communicating, he takes all of that into account. We got to understand that for receivers, we got to play an important role in receiving the message. All right? If God's doing the calling, we got to make sure that we are open and available to receive the message. All right? And what that means is that we got to be active. Right? Anybody ever call somebody and know what they sound like before they when they didn't hang up when they didn't pick up the phone? No, we don't, right? Because God's doing the calling, we got to pick up so we can understand, we can hear. That's part of our active involvement in this thing with communication. All right. So we got to understand that for us to be active to be active receivers, we got to be teachable. Right? We got to be teachable. And to be teachable means that we got to be able to be received, and we got to do something that we don't like to do. We got to stop talking. Right? How many educators do we have in here? Educators go through it day in and day out. They understand that if they got to get this lesson plan across, the class has to stop talking. Right? Right? I know that when I got my report card, when I was in public school, one of the things my parents always looked at, they didn't so much focus on the A's and the B's. They looked at that section that talked about conduct. That's what they looked at. They looked at that section that talked about conduct. Man, if it was anything under a 1, we had a problem. Right? One, because I wasn't positioning myself to be to receive the message that was prepared for me. So we got to stop talking. We got to listen, and we got to be able to be teachable. Right, the writer of Psalms in Psalms 119 in the verse 15 says, I will meditate in thy precepts and have respect unto thy ways. I got to continually think, I got to ponder, I got to deliberately, I got to actively be involved and engaged into God's word if I want to receive the message that he's given to me. Amen. Right. Because I know that if I'm not listening, guess what? Misunderstandings will occur. Right. Now, the receiver has to do a couple things. They got to understand I just can't hear, or do I need to hear, or do I need to listen? These are two different things. Amen. Two different things. Right? And I know that all of the men I see, they great husbands. Right? They great husbands, right? Amen. So I know that they hear. Right? I know they hear. But the problem comes when when you got to step it up a notch, and you really got to turn it into, you got to go from a hearer to a listener. All right? Two totally different things. Right? If God has blessed you with the ability to hear, you can hear without the aid of mechanical intervention.
Amen.
Hey, but fortunately for us, right, God keeps on working, right? Even for those of us that are audibly challenged, right, God has provided devices for us so that we can hear.
Amen.
Right? So hearing is the aspect of just being able to interpret sound. Right? So we can hear. We can hear. But the problem comes in when it's time to listen. Yeah. When it's time to listen, that's when I have to make a conscious choice to turn my ears up a notch. All right? Now, my ears have to work with my mind. Right? If I'm going to listen, my ears have to work with my mind. All right? Right? Because when I'm listening, it's a decision that I make, and I gotta concentrate. Right? I gotta concentrate that my brain is able to process the words or the sentences that either I'm taking in audibly, or from what I'm visually seeing, or from what I'm reading. Okay? Right? So if I'm going to listen, I have to do something. Right? I have to make a decision. I just don't come into the house of the Lord just to hear. All right? That's just punching the bottom hole on the ticket. Right? When I come into the house of the Lord, I have to come in and I got to be prepared to listen. Right? Because if I don't listen, I'll fall for any old thing. Yeah, I'll fall for any old thing, and we'll talk about it. When you fall for anything, that's where misunderstandings come from. Right? So I got to be an active listener when I'm dealing with God. Right? Because God's got to deliver the message. I have to be prepared to be an active listener. Right? If I want to prevent the misunderstanding. All right? So the receiver has to listen. All right? And why is it important for us to listen, even when we don't want to? Right? When we don't want to listen, it's important. We still have to listen. Why? Why? Because if we want to be truly evangelistic, right, we have to not just hear, we got to listen to the views of someone who has an opposing viewpoint on the Word of God. Right? We got to be able to listen. Right? We got to be able to listen to that. It's important, right? Because we can't go out there and save somebody if we don't understand where they're coming from.
Amen.
Right?
Amen.
We got to be able to listen, so we got to understand that. The second reason why I got to listen is when I really care about the person or the relationship, right? I want to listen so I can feel and I can connect with them. Right? That's what we want in our relationships on this time side of life. We want somebody that's able to listen to us. Right? We want somebody that can empathize with us.
Amen.
Right? The key point to empathy is being able to listen.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now we understand that this is an equation. All right? So when you have when you have the communicator and you have the receiver and you have the message, but you're minus the listening, guess what you have? A misunderstanding. That's what you have. Now, when you have the receiver, but there is no communicator and there is no message, you have misunderstanding. Right? And even more so, when you have the message, you have the communicator, and there is no communicator and there is no receiver, then you have misunderstanding. And finally, we understand that if there's a communicator and there's a receiver, and then you have plus misunderstanding, and you're not listening, that's when we deal with error. Right? That's what we are dealing with in society today, in the religious realm. Right? We want to call it error. We want to call it everything else but what it is. Right? There's a doctrine out there that, guess what? It's just nothing but error. Why? Because it wasn't communicated from the right source. The receiver didn't receive it correctly. The message was flawed that was communicated, or there was just an absence of actual active listening going on. All right. So those leave us with misunderstanding and error. All right. We know that God left us with His Son, right? And they called Jesus Rabbi, right? And He was the teacher. Right, rabbi meaning teacher, and Jesus was a great communicator. All right, no, that wasn't a title for our last president. No, Jesus was the great communicator. When we go back and we study Jesus and we look at His life, there was not one person that Jesus was not able to communicate with. Right? Who did that Jesus associated himself with. It wasn't doctors, it wasn't theologians, right? He dealt with the common man. He dealt with sinners, right? He dealt with killers, with murderers, with thieves, with liars, with backbiters, right? These people didn't have these big old degrees and titles that he associated with. Jesus made sure that he was able to communicate his message to the people that needed it most. Amen. That's what Jesus was able to do. Not only did was Jesus an effective communicator, but Jesus also, how did Jesus communicate? Right? Jesus communicated in parables. Right? Do we know what parables are? Right? I know a lot of these of our young children. Right? When it's time to get a point across, right? We give them a story. Right? We give them a story, Aesop's fables, right? We want to be able to get a point across, right? But when Jesus talked in parables, not only did he want to get a point across, but Jesus also was fulfilling a prophecy. Right? Right? The prophet Isaiah communicated in his holy word that Jesus was going to talk in prophecy. And we see the fulfillment of that prophecy in Matthew chapter 13, verse 34 and 35. But not only just to fulfill the prophecy, in Matthew chapter 13 and verse 13, Jesus says, therefore I speak to them in parables, because they see not, and hearing, they hear not, neither do they understand. Jesus was attempting to get us to understand. Right? And when we go back and we look at the Gospels, we can remember a whole lesson. It's a lot of parables, right? Some of them short and some of them long. We got the parable of leaven. We got the parable of the mustard seed, the parable of the tares of the field, the parables of the sower. My favorite one is the parable of the unmerciful servant. Right? When we look at these parables, there should be something that we should be able to get on how we have to indicate or how we have to live in our lives. Amen. Right? And that's what we got to be mindful of. Right? That's what we have to be mindful of. Right? We can get something from these parables. All right? Right? And Jesus understood that he had to effectively communicate to his receivers. Right? Because he was dealing with people that had a different level of understanding of who he was and what his purpose was. All right? And we got to understand when Jesus is talking to us, we are not always ready at a spiritual level to be able to read and to understand that message what Jesus has or what God is attempting to communicate with us. Amen. Right? Right? So we got to understand that when we are communicating with God, we got to be committed to growth. Right? Amen. If we're not committed to growth, that communication level that we have with God is going to be messed up. Amen. Right? Misunderstandings can occur. If we're not ready to study, guess what? Misunderstandings are going to occur. Right? And if we're not ready to study and grow, we're going to have some misunderstandings about two of the greatest things that God has given to us. Right? Those are grace and those are mercy. Right? If we're not ready to study, if we're not ready to grow, we're going to have a complete misunderstanding of those two gifts. And I say that they're gifts because they are gifts. Right? Because that's what the Word of God tells us that they are. They are gifts. The gift of grace, in God's Word, we see that the gift of grace was given to us abundantly. Amen. Right? Amen. We got to understand what grace is. That's an unmerited favor. When we're talking about grace, we don't deserve it. Right? We didn't do anything to take it for God to give it to us. God gave it to us even yet when we were sinners. Right? God gave us this thing called grace. Right? And God also gave us mercy. Right? When we abuse grace. Turn the Bible to Romans chapter 6 and verse 1. When we abuse grace. What's cleansing us? It's mercy. Let's read what Romans chapter 6 and verse 1 has to tell us about grace. And this is the application of mercy in the very same verse.
It says, what shall we say then?
Shall we say then?
Shall we continue in sin?
Shall we continue in sin?
That grace may abound?
That grace may abound.
God forbid.
God forbid. We got to understand that when we're dealing with God, right, because there are misunderstandings, we will misapply God's word. Right? Because there are some things that we have to understand. And we got to make sure that not only that we understand, but the world understands. Right? Right? When we accept Jesus Christ in our life as our Lord and Savior, right? This thing about grace, right? God understands that, yeah, we may be a work in process, but God wants to see that change in us. Right? Right? God doesn't say that we got a misunderstanding out there about once saved, always saved. Right? That's a misunderstanding of grace. Right? And again, I tell you, it's all a misunderstanding. Right? It's all about a misunderstanding. And we got a responsibility as believers to make sure that that misunderstanding is cleared up. Right? We got to make sure that we understand that. Right? Though we misunderstand grace, we therefore we are abusing God's mercy. All right? All right, and what's mercy? Mercy is taking back the justice, holding back the justice that we really, really deserve. Right? That's what mercy is. How many of us have been to Mercy Drive lately? All right? Yeah, the police will tell us not to go. Right? Other people will tell us not to go. I say that we gotta go to Mercy Drive. I gotta say we need to live on Mercy Drive. I gotta say if we're not comfortable with going to Mercy Drive, we got a problem. All right? We got a problem. Why? Because it's a misunderstanding. Right? The world will tell us one thing, right? But God will tell us something, but God's word tells us something different, right? And that's what we got to understand. That's what we got to understand. If we want to fulfill God's message, we got to have a true understanding of what he wants from us. Amen. Now, Jesus had the ability to communicate, so he talked in parables. Sometimes Jesus was just straight down the line. When we find Jesus in John, the 8th chapter, we understand some things that just happened. The Feast of the Tabernacle had been completed. And Jesus had an interaction, and it had several interactions with the Pharisees. All right? And Jesus didn't really cut any corners in the 8th chapter of John. Right? And if we have somebody who can read John the 8th chapter and beginning at verse 1.
Verse 1 says, Jesus went unto the Mount of Olives.
Yes.
And early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people came unto him, and he sat down and taught them.
All right, so Jesus, when he went to the tabernacle to teach, Jesus had a purpose, right? Again, what was Jesus doing? Jesus was going to teach. Jesus was going to communicate his message. Jesus was going to teach, right?
Right.
But we see that Jesus is going to be, he's going to be met with some folk. Go ahead.
Amen. And the scribes and the Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they say unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery, in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what sayest thou?
All right. All right. So we see that Jesus was in the temple. But Jesus was in the temple and he was addressed by the Pharisees and the scribes. And they wanted to come in and they found this woman in the very act of adultery. And they brought this woman to Jesus, right? Because they were trying to catch Jesus in a bind, right? They wanted to be able to put charge against Jesus, right? Man, but they messed up. The first thing they messed up with, they only brought one, right? That was the first error that they had. They only brought one, right? Now we got some adults in here. We don't have to dive deep into this one. Right? But for adultery to happen and to be caught in the very act, it takes two individuals. Right? But they only brought one. And they brought this woman. They brought this woman in the middle of her shame just so that they can try to catch Jesus. Right? So we gotta be mindful of that. We gotta be mindful of that. When it's time to correct somebody, right? We don't correct just the one that easy target. We got to correct everybody. Right? We got to correct everybody. All right? And we know that Jesus was an excellent communicator. Right? We want to see how Jesus communicated, right? Because we talked about three different types of communication, right? Right? We talked about written, we talked about verbal, and we talked about auditory, right? Right? Let's see how Jesus communicates. Let's see how Jesus communicates in verse 6. In verse 6.
This they said, tempting him that they might have to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and with his fingers wrote on the ground as though he heard them not.
Oh man, Jesus started to write. Jesus started to write. The Bible doesn't tell us what he wrote. The Bible doesn't tell us what he wrote, but it had to be something serious. It had to be something serious. Right? It's not recorded what he wrote. Right? But he wrote, right? So he didn't even give him the sense that he was paying attention to him. Right? And sometimes that's what we got to do. When people bring foolishness to you, we don't have to recognize it all the time. Right? Their foolishness does not go to the top of our priority. All right? We got to understand that we're called to do certain things from God. All right? And tending to the world's foolishness is not one of them. All right? Because we got to understand that that the most important thing are the souls of the lost. Right? And that's what we got to focus on. Read.
So when they continued asking him,
Oh, they kept on talking.
he lifted up himself
All right, now he's going to say something. All right, go ahead.
and said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at him.
Oh man. He said, him that is without sin, cast the first stone. All right. He gave a specific direction to a specific audience. Right? And how can teachers? How can you tell that your message is received? Right? Right? By the action. By the action that comes out from it. Okay? Right? When the teacher says, Johnny, go right on the board. All right? If Johnny doesn't get it, if Johnny doesn't get up and go right on the board, right? It's whoa, what happened? All right? Right? It was something got lost in communication. Something got lost in translation. All right? But Jesus gave a specific task, right? First, he identified who he was talking to. He that is without sin. All right? So Jesus is specific in who he talks to. All right? So if any of those individuals that had brought that woman to him was without sin, they had the opportunity to do what? To cast the first stone. Let's see how many rocks were thrown that day. Let's see how many rocks were thrown that day. Go ahead and read.
And they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one,
Oh man.
beginning at the elders, even to the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst.
Oh. And how you can tell that your message is received, right? By folks' actions, right? That's how you can tell. That's how you can tell that the message was received. All right? Right? And the Word of God says, and at this, they begin to go away one at a time, from the oldest to the first, until only Jesus was skewed. Let me go again. Read verse 8 again, brother. Verse 8.
And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience,
They were convicted by their own conscience. All right? Jesus didn't make them do anything. All right? And that's the power of the Word of God. Right? That's when Jesus speaks, it has the power to convict. It has the power to convict. Ain't that something? All right? Just like it can. As he spoke these words, many believed on him. All right? That's what it takes us to do. Right? When we give Jesus, when we put Jesus in the right place, when we give Jesus the honor, when we put Jesus in the forefront of our lives, right? When we take a look at his word at a level where I'm not just hearing, I'm actually listening, right? Because that's what happened, right? This group of Jews now, they went from hearing and they started to actively listen. All right? How do we know? How do we know? Right? Because we can see that there was a change that occurred. Right? Right? Just like the change that occurred with those men that wanted to throw those rocks. Right? There was their action change. And what was their action? They actively believed. That's what God's word said. Right? So they went from non-believing to believing what Jesus Christ had to say. All right? That's what they did. That's how they cleared up that misunderstanding. Those Jews that believed were able to comprehend and able to understand that Jesus was the Messiah. They were able to achieve a freedom that we can enjoy today. All right? What are you talking about, freedom? We all free. Right? Right? For some of us, slavery ended 400 years ago. And but I tell you, some of us are just as shackled today as these folk were then. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. They said, I'm a seed of Abraham. I've never been a slave to anybody. Oh man, but Jesus had to tell them that they were slaves of sin. Right? They're slaves of sin. How many of us can remember when we were slaves of sin? All right? It has given us benefit of the doubt. Ain't that right? Right? So we got to give each other the benefit of the doubt. And we can say that in past tense, we were slaves of sin. All right? Man, but there's many of us that are still slaves of sin. Right? We still worship the master and we can't let the world go. Right? It's too good to us. Right? But we got to understand that if we want to follow Jesus, right, we can no longer be a slave to sin. We got to be a slave to sin because Jesus gave us a freedom. Right? In John chapter 8, verse 31, Brother Willie.
Verse 31 says, Then said Jesus to those Jews which believed on him, If ye continue in my word, then are ye my disciples indeed.
Yeah. In verse 32.
And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free.
The truth is what makes us free.
Amen.
When we clear up that misunderstanding, right, we're going to give people freedom. We're going to give people freedom.
Amen.
All right, in today's society, we got all these woke individuals. Right, everybody wants to be woke. That's one of the catchy terms. Right, we want to be woke. Right, we can be woke and chained up at the same time.
Amen.
All right, we got if you don't understand God's word, if you don't understand what His mission for us, right, you got to continue. No matter how woke you are, you still going to be chained. You're still going to be a slave to sin. You're going to be a slave to this world. We got to make sure that we don't do that. We got to make sure that we don't do that. All right? So we got to understand that Jesus was dealing with comprehension here. Right? There were still individuals in that very same group that did not understand, that did not comprehend, though how clearly Jesus talked to them. No matter how clear Jesus talked to them, they still didn't comprehend. Right? And we deal with that today. And I'm going to tell you, it's a family thing. We don't listen because it's a family thing. Right? When we don't listen, we don't comprehend, it's a family thing. All right? And it starts with who your father is. It starts exactly with who your father is. Let's go down to verse 43, Brother Willie.
33.
And let's see, who's your father? John chapter 8 and verse 43. Who's your daddy? Go ahead.
Why do ye not understand my speech? Even because you cannot hear my word.
Right? Because you can't hear. All right? Right now, when Jesus said it's not that you can't hear, Jesus knew that you can hear. But Jesus was saying, you're not listening to me. You're not listening to me. I'm not. It's not because how of my voice. It's not because of my tone. It's not because of I'm speaking in a different language. Saying that you are not hearing. You are not listening to what I'm saying.
Amen.
All right.
He said, "Ye are of your father, the devil."
Who's your father?
Yep.
Right. We got to answer that question. Who's your father? If you are not receiving God's word, you got to understand who is your father. Who are you serving? Right. Not some of the time, but all the time. Right? If you're not serving God all the time, right, then God's not your father any of the time. Right? Right? We gotta understand that. Right? If we're not able to serve God all the time, right, we gotta understand that He's not our God any of the time. Alright? We gotta understand that. Right? And that's where that misunderstanding of grace, that misunderstanding of mercy comes into play. Alright? That's where it is. Right? Well, I'm a work in progress. All right, but how much progress? How much progress are you working?
Amen.
Right? How much progress? Right? Do we keep, as God continues to bless us with grace, and He continues to shower us with mercy, we continue to walk back. We continue to walk back. God wants us to go closer to Him because God did not create the gap.
Amen.
Right? We created the gap.
Amen.
We created that gap between God. Right? And God says that He's still here for us. Right? But we got to actively go towards Him. That's what we got to do. Read.
Amen. It said, "And the lust of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth,
Didn't abode in the truth.
because there was no truth in him."
Oh man, there's no truth in it. If there's no truth in it, and Jesus just said that the truth will set you free, why are you with the devil? Right? Because you won't be free. The devil does not want you to be free.
Amen.
Right? Do we see that correlation there? The truth will set you free, but there's no truth that resides in the devil. Right? It's no truth that resides in him. If you're looking for freedom, you can't get it from him.
Amen.
You're looking at the wrong father. Go ahead and read it.
Said, "When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own.
Yeah.
But he is a liar and the father of it."
And he is the that's who you're serving.
Amen.
If you're not serving God, if you're not serving this, if you're not following by the example that Jesus Christ left for you, right? The misunderstanding is that, yeah, I'm gonna get there, I'm gonna get there. No, misunderstanding is that your father's a liar. Your father's a liar. We gotta understand that. We gotta understand. And verse 45.
"And because I tell you the truth, ye believe me not.
Yeah, go through 47, brother.
Which of you convinced me of sin? say the truth, why do ye not believe in me? He that is of God heareth God's word. Ye therefore hear them not, because ye are not of God.
All right. As we come to a close, we talk about this thing called comprehension. Right? We talk about this thing about comprehension. Jesus was who wanted us to be able to comprehend his word. Jesus did a dynamite job of making sure that we were able to comprehend the truths that these folk had to accept. These Pharisees were so caught up on their lineage, right? They were so caught up in their lineage that they were expecting a different kind of king. Right? They were so caught up on their lineage that there was some power that they didn't want to give up. Right? Right? Even to the extent that we'll say, you know what? Yeah, you may be a prophet, but you're not the Messiah. Right? Even to the extent that they'll say, you know what? You got to set this kingdom that you're going to set up on this kingdom that you're supposed to set up. It's supposed to look just like ours. Right? Right? Because of that, they were not able to receive the truth. And Jesus had to tell them that because the truth that you're going after is from your father, the devil. Right? We got to understand that there's some truths that are out there that are generated. If the truth didn't generate from God, then the truth generated from who? Right? And we know that that truth is not the truth, that it is a lie. In our evangelistic efforts, we got to understand that we got some misunderstandings out there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because we have love one for another, right? We're going to charge them as an understanding. Right? We got to give people the benefit of the doubt. Right? We got to give people the benefit of the doubt until they prove us wrong. Right? So it's in our best effort to give people the benefit of the doubt, and we got to be able to show them the love that Jesus had for us. All right? We may not like them. We may not like how they look. We may not like how they smell. We may not like how they act. Right? But it's still our responsibility to love them. And because we love them, we want to make sure that they are safe. Right? And we got to clear up that misunderstanding. We got to clear up that misunderstanding. When we hear the misunderstanding that some people say that once saved, always saved, right? We got to understand that, it may be said out of ignorance.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a misunderstanding that we have the opportunity to clear up. When we hear that misunderstanding that, that this world won't be destroyed when Jesus comes back, I love you so much, I'm going to show you where you got that's misunderstanding. Right? When we hear that we can worship Jesus, when we can worship God in any way that we want to, that's a misunderstanding. Amen. And we have the responsibility because we love, because we have love for the lost. We have the responsibility to clear that understanding up.
Right.
That's what it's about. It's about clearing up these misunderstandings. Now, once we identify that it's not just an understanding, right? Then we got a responsibility. All right. God doesn't tell us that we got to stay around with for the rest of our lives. Right? It's our responsibility to make sure that we go out and we preach to the lost. Right? We don't got to keep on coming back to the same house over and over and over again. Right? What did Jesus tell those that he sent out? Right? He told them if they don't receive you, what do you do? Right? They shake them sandals off and go. All right? That's what we got to do. But we cannot miss the fact that we have a responsibility, church.
Yeah.
Our responsibility is to clear up a misunderstanding.
Amen.
We got a misunderstanding. And one of the things that we understand is that our Heavenly Father, Jesus, is in heaven right now. That he sits in heaven right now on the right hand of God. Right? And we understand that one of the things we understand is that the power that was in Jesus Christ's blood on the day that he was crucified, the same strength that it had then, it has now. Right? We understand that Jesus' blood has the power to save. Right? We understand that Jesus Christ is going to heaven. Right? We understand that Jesus Christ is still that intercessor on our behalf. That's what we understand. That's what we want to get out to people. And we also understand for us to be in that covenant relationship with Jesus Christ, that there are certain things that we have to do. Right? We got some misunderstanding that people got to vote. Right? We got some misunderstanding that all I have to do is say a prayer that I can't find in the Bible. That's a misunderstanding. Right? But we got have to do if we want to be considered a child of God.
Amen.
That's what we have to understand. And we gotta heed to that. We gotta heed to that. We gotta hear the word of God. We gotta hear the gospel. Right? And that's the death, burial, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Right? We gotta hear that Jesus Christ came down in the sin cursed world, not because he wanted to, not because it was on his schedule, right? Because he loved us so much. Not because he loved us so much that he gave his life for you and for me. That's we gotta have that kind of faith that Abraham had. Right? When Abraham, did he see it? No, but he was able to rejoice because he had the faith in God.
Amen.
Right? That's what we gotta have. Right? We gotta believe it. We gotta believe that God is a reward of those that diligently seek him. All right? We gotta believe that. We gotta believe that. We believe that we gotta repent of our sins. Right? We gotta understand that, you know what, there are some things that we are doing and they're contrary to God's will. Right? And God requires us to change. He requires us to change. Right? We gotta confess that Jesus Christ is the Son of Man. Jesus tells us, if you don't confess me in front of man, I will not confess you to my Father. Right? It's just a shame for us to do all this good living down here. All this good living down here. This good wholesome living. Right? This living that we can tell all of our friends and family about. But if we can't confess him, he says that he won't confess our Father. Right? And that's that misunderstanding that we got to be able to clear up. Right? We also got to clear up that misunderstanding that you know what, that water baptism is not essential. Right? It's all a misunderstanding. And how do we clear that misunderstanding up? By going to God's word.
Amen.
If it was good enough for the early church, it's good enough for me. All right? That's what we got to understand. Right? You got some folk that want to partake in some of the law. You want to take some part of some of it, partake in all of it. All right? Then we can talk. Right? If you make it out, if you can make it past an hour. Right? Then we can talk. Right? But if you can't partake in the whole law, right? Then you can't partake in none of it. We got to understand that water baptism is essential. It is essential to our salvation. And then we got to make sure that we understand that we got to live faithfully unto death.
Amen.
Right? And that's one of the biggest misunderstandings that we have. Unfortunately, people want to feed the lust of their father. They want to feed through that lust of their father and continue to do those things that makes their father happy. All right? And when your father's not the right father, you stand a guilty distance away from God. But we understand as children, as his children, you know what? We may fall, we may struggle, we got opportunities galore. Right? But we gotta keep on striving to meet that mark of the high calling. Right? That's our responsibility. We gotta continue to do that. That's what we gotta continue to do. When we do that, and we come up to a stumbling block, we come up to one of those mountains that may seem that we can't get around. Right? We go to God to pray. That's what we ask God. We ask God for forgiveness of our sins. We ask him for strength to overcome those challenges. Give me the strength to overcome this opportunity that I've identified in my life. That's why we go to God. That's why we're in that relationship. Right? Because we know that when I'm in that relationship with God, I have Jesus on my side interceding on my behalf. Right? It's not no other man that I need. I need Jesus to intercede on my behalf.
Amen.
If anybody tells you that you need somebody else to intercede, right, it's just a misunderstanding, y'all. It's just a misunderstanding. And it's our responsibility to clear up that misunderstanding.
Amen.
Let's get some fire about clearing up misunderstanding. We got to get fired up about clearing up misunderstanding. Right? How in our individual lives how are we clearing up misunderstanding? All right? That's how we got to look at it. Look at it like it's a misunderstanding. Until you can vet that it's not a misunderstanding, right? And that's how we got to look at it. Right? God doesn't want anyone to be lost. Right? But God also wants us to heed to his word. God wants us to meet his to meet that responsibility. Right? Not only are we supposed to be baptized, but we're supposed to go out to preach and save the lost. Right? We forget that. Right? We forget that first part of that Great Commission. Right? And we get stuck on baptized because we selfish. Right? I got baptized. I come to church every Sunday. Right? But whoa. Before we get to baptism, we're supposed to do some other things too. Right? Right? So if we get fired up about going out and being evangelistic in our day-to-day lives, that's God to pray for us. He'll give us the strength. Right? If we know we got to grow, we got to study. Right? If we don't know the plan of salvation, guess what? Study. somebody played an important part in your life, and they made sure that the misunderstanding that you had was all cleared up.
Amen.
It's all understanding. Let us stand as we're led in the verse of the song.
Sinners Jesus will receive.